We're picking up in Philippians chapter 1, beginning in verse 12, and we'll look at this passage on through verse 18. Remembering that the Apostle Paul was writing this to the Christians in Philippi from his imprisonment. So we see words like chains and bondage being used here. So keep that in mind as we look verse by verse at this passage. Now, I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that what has happened to me has actually served to advance the gospel. This word to know is in that continual present tense. We talked about this in the previous video, looking at what I call the perpetual tense. He wanted his readers to continually know that what has happened to him has actually served to advance the gospel. This word for served here is put in what's called the perfect tense. This is a past action with present implications. And we see that as Paul continues to write here, that this past action of him being in prison has present implications, that being the advancement of the gospel. And the word gospel means good news, the good news that was being spread, good news of Jesus. Verse 13, as a result, it has become clear throughout the whole palace guard and to everyone else that I am in chains for Christ. This word become, it has become clear. This is in a verb tense that means this undefined time. It's uncertain of when it happened. So in other words, it didn't necessarily immediately happen. It happened at some point. At some point, it became clear throughout the whole palace guard to everyone else that Paul was in prison for the sake of Jesus, for his message of the news of Christ. Verse 14, and because of my chains, most of the brothers and sisters have become confident in the Lord and dare all the more to proclaim the gospel without fear. The word here for confident is also in the perfect tense, that past action with present implications. They became confident, and as a result of that past action, the present implications are that they are daring to proclaim the gospel. Now, the word used for daring and to proclaim are both in that present tense that implies a present tense that's moving on into the future, a perpetual tense. So, because of this past action of them becoming confident because of Paul being imprisoned, that confidence led them to this continual lifestyle of daring, boldness, and this continual lifestyle of proclaiming the good news without fear. Verse 15, it is true that some preach Christ out of envy and rivalry, but others out of goodwill. This word for preach is also in that present, a continual tense. Some have this lifestyle of preaching Christ out of envy and rivalry. Some have this lifestyle of preaching Christ out of goodwill. This word envy, I find interesting. The word envy, at its root, means to decay. And you think about these good feelings, good emotions, or things that should inspire a good response, decaying to something bad. So envy is just that. It's something in another person that should result in a good response, but it decays into something bad. You become envious of somebody's good fortune, and it turns to this bad feelings towards their good fortune. The word for rivalry here is a word for arguing and debating. So in other words, some continually preach Christ out of motives that have decayed to something else. And they do this just to debate and argue. But others do it out of goodwill. The latter do so out of love, knowing that I am put here for the defense of the gospel. The word for love is that word agape, the unconditional love. And this knowing is also in that perfect tense, the past action with present implications. They have come to know that Paul was in prison for the defense of the gospel, the good news. And by coming to know that, there are present implications, as we're seeing in their proclaiming of this this good news. The former preach Christ out of selfish ambition, this is verse 17, not sincerely, supposing that they can stir up trouble for me while I am in chains. The former preach Christ out of selfish ambition. This word for selfish ambition here is that same word used for rivalry. It's that arguing and debating. The former preach Christ to argue and debate, not sincerely, supposing they can continually stir up trouble, this present continual tense, for me while I am in chains. Verse 18, but what does it matter? The important thing is that in every way, whether from false motives or true, Christ is preached. And because of this, I rejoice. Yes, I will continue to rejoice. This is the present tense, and this here is the future tense. So Paul rejoices now, and in the future he will rejoice also that Christ is being preached. Even if people are doing it just a debate, and even if their motives have decayed into something that they ought not to be, he'll still rejoice because Christ is being preached. However, you look at this contrast too, and there's some applications here in terms of the people who are doing the preaching. Is it being done with decayed motives? Is it being done just to win a debate in an argument? Or are people preaching out of this unconditional love for others and doing it as a way of spreading the good news of Jesus? The next video will pick up in verse 19.